Hello everyone, this is Mark and thank you for checking out the channel. Today I have an interesting story. I think it's interesting. Yesterday I was on a service call, a kind of a typical service call actually, where the customer says, oh, I have outlets in my living room and my bedroom that are tripped. They're not working. And of course I asked her, did you go to the circuit breaker panel box and did you see if there's a breaker tripped? And she says, yes, we went there. All the breakers are not tripped. We've actually turned them off and then back on again just to confirm and make sure that that it's not the breaker. Now, it might still be the breaker, right? But this was an interesting problem. I've been dealing with this issue here for several, I want to say a couple of years now. We run into this same problem, and it's all due to an inferior method of wiring up 15 amp outlets. Okay, so long story short is that this project took me a couple of hours to fully troubleshoot, which cost them several $100s. And the problem was due to the original wiring of the house. Wired legally, correctly, yet still inferior. And it was built back in the 80s. It's a production level house. And it has worked, what, 40 years, nearly 40 years, still working, okay, until yesterday. Or actually, it's been an intermittent problem happening for the last couple of weeks. She called me 2 weeks ago and said we're having this problem where the outlets are out. And then she calls me back and goes, oh, it's all working again. It's all working. No worries. Okay, so she called me yesterday and said it's emergency. We need you to come out and fix it. It took me several hours to resolve. Basically, it involved taking apart, first, of course, checking the breaker, making sure that we have voltage coming from each breaker and feeding the wire. As it turns out, we had power on the hot lead, and it worked 122 volt all the way or to ground, but we only had about 40 volts to the neutral side, which I don't want to get technical here, but basically that told me from experience this is a loose neutral. So not a loose hot wire. Certainly the ground system worked, but the neutral system was off. So the only way to resolve this that I know of is go and take apart each outlet that's affected. Hopefully that'll resolve it. I can tell stories about that where that didn't resolve it, but the problem was due to this kind of an outlet, and this is the culprit. I don't know if you can see this very well, but there are no screws in which to tighten down the wires. Okay, this outlet, which is a grounding outlet here, it's got your hot, neutral, and ground, right? Everything's good. No screws. This is a speed wire system where basically you strip the wire. There's a little strip gauge right there. I don't know if you can see that. A little strip gauge. You strip the wire and stab it into the back. We call this backstabbing. We call it a stab connection, speed wire connection. So there's a lot of different names for it. And these kinds of outlets where there's no screws at all on them, I have not been able to find an outlet like that. So like they don't offer them at Home Depot and they don't sell them at Lowe's. I just did a search for them. All the outlets that they have for sale at Home Depot and Lowe's offer the opportunity to attach the wires under a screw, which is the normal way, right? But this is a speed wire system, and you may think, oh, this is a perfectly good way of doing it, because it permits you to do it quickly, and all you're going to do is stab it in there. Except for that the connection is so poor inside there that it will work, but if you put it under a load, and in this case at this lady's house, she was using an iron. She was ironing some clothes. Irons pull 1,000 watts or 1,100 watts, and that was simply too much load to operate this kind of a connection. And it took 40 years for it to happen, but it's like inevitable. It's a bad connection. This is the same problem I have with lever nuts and these quick connectors. They may work, they're illegal, they are legal, not illegal, but they're inferior and we shouldn't do them, shouldn't use them. So this kind actually does not permit you to put it under a screw. So if you find what you'll see on an outlet, on a regular 15 amp outlet, is the opportunity to take your wire and stab it into the back to make the connection. Do not be tempted to do that. Okay, don't do it. Use the wires, or put the wires, turn them, put them under the screw and connect them. Now there is another called a back-wired system, and that uses a screw, and the screw tensions the grip ring system. That is a superior, that is a perfectly good method of doing it. GFCIs all use the screw. You put the wire in the back and you tighten it with a screw. Now that's a perfectly good system. Okay. Now you may ask, why would anybody do this? I mean, obviously it's to save time. And the question is, well, if electricians all know that it's inferior, why do they do it, right? Well, I was an electrician working as an apprentice for years under another electrical contractor, a major electrical contractor in Virginia, and I was expressly forbidden from using the screw system because it took longer to put the wires under a screw. And I'm moving house to house. I have wired literally thousands of outlets, and I was instructed, you use the stab system. It's quicker, it's legal, it's to code, it's perfectly good. And from time to time, we would have a customer who were building a custom home, and they'd say, no, don't stab the wires. Don't put a backstab system. I want every wire to be under a screw. And we would agree to do that, but we charged more money for that, okay? Because it took us more time. So since you're the homeowner, I'm probably not going to be getting electricians asking this question of me because they all know the truth. If you're given the opportunity to backstab your wire into the back of the outlet, don't do it. Here's an interesting proof that I can show you. In a 20 amp outlet, the opportunity to stab into the back with a 12 gauge wire does not exist. It is not even to code. Okay? So 12 gauge wires must be put under a screw. There's no backstabbing of a 12 gauge wire into a 20 amp outlet. So that might tell you something about why is that? Well, 20 amp outlets are generally feeding heavier devices. They're feeding air fryers, toaster ovens, bathrooms, they feed hair dryers, and devices that pull more power. So you got a heavier wire, heavier duty grippers on the outlet itself, and they say no. The backstabbing of a 20 amp system doesn't even exist. Okay, so that might tell you a little bit about why you probably shouldn't do it with a 15 amp outlet. Don't cut corners. Do it right. Take your wire, strip it, twist it around the screw head, and screw it in. Screw it with the tightening. So the back wiring system, where you actually use a screw to tighten it down, perfectly acceptable. And if you look at all GFCI outlets, they use that system where you put the wire in the back and then you tighten it down with a screw. That's a perfectly good system. But these backstabs where you stab it into the back and that's a good enough connection, it'll work for a while, and then later you'll be calling an electrician out because your outlets don't work. Because either the hot lead doesn't work or the neutral lead doesn't work, and the whole system won't work. So save yourself some money, do it right the first time. Anyhow, thank you very much for listening. If this is interesting to you, consider subscribing to the channel. because I'm going to be feeding more information like this to the internet, and I'm doing some other things too. So hopefully it'll be interesting to you. Consider subscribing, and I thank you for your time. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.